It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, lads and lasses of all ages, welcome to the show. It is Tuesday, November 26th, 2024, and it is time to get nerdy. Welcome to episode 325 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest gaming podcast in the multiverse. I am one of your hosts, Maction, and I am joined by my fellow nerd and connoisseur of comedy. Not just the first option, but also the best option, Mr. Lam Galuka, also known as Mr. Nice Guy 425. And for the next hour, we are going to talk about all things as they relate to video games, whether that is video game news, history, trivia, lawsuits, and a little bit of everything in between. But first, Mr. Nice Guy, it's been a couple of weeks. How have you been, man?
I've been good, and shout out to our friends of the show, listeners, for understanding we did not record last week. Things come up, and I'm sure you'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the newest developments in my life, Mac, is I'm doing this laser tag league that I've talked to you about. And when you hear laser tag, you think, oh, little, cartoony looking guns, a vest, children at their birthday party. And there is some of that. But this place that I play has real military style guns. They have a course set up. They have bombs that you can defuse. They have different objectives that you play, capture the flag. So went out there today and played with a group of guys who probably range from college age to 50s. So I'm somewhere in the between. Very, very competitive. And I feel like this is the week 2. I played like trash, but we won. And this is the second week that my team has won. So undefeated, very sore, burned some calories, and had a blast. Taking my kids there on Black Friday. Life is good, Mac. Getting to work out and getting my video game in real life on. So, what's new with you?
Well, last week we didn't record. Entirely my fault. Well, not entirely my fault. There was a bomb cyclone that was kind of problematic. I guess that's what they call it, but it was, winds of 75 miles an hour. It was really funny because in our Discord, I mentioned to everybody else, I was like, hey, I don't know if it's going to work out. The power's been a little bit spotty at my house. And then, as I hit enter, bam, power goes out. Not just to the house, but also to, the cell phone towers locally, I guess, because then we didn't have signal, we didn't have things.
Really?
Yeah, so it was a bit there. So, yeah, I was just off the grid for a little while. So, flashlights and, old school print books. But still, an okay time from time to time.
How did the cat handle that?
Cat was just fine. Excuse to snuggle, just snuggling some more. So,
Love it.
But yeah, it was all right. Although, honestly, Nice Guy, over here, I don't know how it is over there, but over here, it gets dark early. So the fact that all the, house lights were off, it was just same stuff, different day, I guess.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's interesting, too, because it's funny when the power goes out, at least for me. I don't think generally about all the stuff that is required, or that power requires, that is required power to use. My English is terrible because I'm exhausted. You think, oh, the power's out, well, I'll just do this. Oh, no, wait, that actually requires power, or it requires internet. So, you can use your phone, and if you have stuff downloaded, you're good to go. But like you said, flashlight and a book, something that if you have battery is always a good solution. What'd you read?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. What did I read? Oh, I read a book on dinosaurs. I had one sitting around. It was a picture book on dinosaurs and,
A picture book?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay.
With words, though.
Yeah, it had plenty of words. Maybe picture book isn't the right word. Probably visual encyclopedia is probably the better thing.
What grade level would you, if you had to estimate, what grade level is this book?
I don't know. I would say it's at least high school grade, because it is like a visual encyclopedia. There's just lots and lots of images for it. But yeah, it's not like a kid's book, although, like, have you met... Children love dinosaurs.
They do.
I would not put it past a, like, 6-year-old to be cracking out the encyclopedia of dinosaurs and just going all in on it. So, like, reading level, I mean, really, it's all about passion level.
But I thought it was funny you started that sentence by saying, have you met? And I think you were about to say kids. And I was going to say, oh, Mac, have you been to my house?
There is at least the indications of the presence of some children there.
Well, enough about dinosaurs, enough about storms, and enough about laser tag, my friend. I say we do what we do best and hop right up in that gaming news. What do you think about that?
Mr. Nice Guy, I'm so out of the loop. What is new in video gaming?
So much. But you know what else is new? This is episode 325 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. A few more episodes until 2025, Mac. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is I want to talk to you about Black Friday, and there's an article here on Kotaku.com written by Ethan Gack titled 13 of our favorite Black Friday 2024 gaming deals. Before we even dive into that, it's funny. This is the Thanksgiving episode, and in the past 3 or 4 years, I've always asked you, like, what is your favorite Thanksgiving food? And I think you've always said the same thing, which is pecan pie.
Sweet potato pie.
Dang it. I think I got that wrong last year, too.
That's okay. I mean, pecan pie's good, too.
I'm going to go back and listen to last year's episode. Is it still sweet potato pie, or has something surpassed sweet potato pie in the S-tier Thanksgiving foods for Mac?
I still love sweet potato pie, but I'll tell you what, butternut squash has been coming up the ranks quickly, and it's just such a good food. Some lightly seasoned, throw it under the broiler. It's really good.
Is that a Thanksgiving food?
I mean, it's a winter food because it's one of them gourds, you know? So,
okay, fair.
I guess technically you could get it. I mean, what with the way the world turns, it's always winter somewhere, so you can get it, you know, from wherever. But, like, I usually see it in markets around the wintertime.
It's like one of those foods. I forgot to mention this. So this past 2 weekends ago, I went to, what's the arcade called? The bar. It's called some arcade here in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin. $20 arcade. I think it's called the Barcade.
Okay.
I'm gonna find out the name in a minute.
Because you're gonna take me there, right?
We're gonna go there when you come visit. Absolutely.
Yeah.
$20. You play as long as you want. Come and go as you please. Absolutely.
I'll bring a Jackson.
And they got pinball. So anyway, they had Gauntlet Legends. And your talk of butternut squash. It sounds like the type of food you would eat if you're low HP and wanting to heal.
Yes.
And so, butternut squash. I don't believe it's a Thanksgiving food, but I believe it provides sustenance, as they would say in Gauntlet.
Canonically, food is good. And
food is good.
So is that.
And so is that game.
Oh, but how about you, Mr. Nice Guy? I don't remember your favorite, but you asked it me, I got to ask it back.
It's so tough because I don't know if I have a favorite. I will be smoking turkey breast and ham this year.
Excellent.
So I know that's going to be a 10 out of 10. I really am a big sides person, and cranberry sauce is one of my favorite Thanksgiving foods. I'm going to just go on record and say it is not a garnish. You can eat cranberry sauce and enjoy it.
I thought you were going to say it is not a garnish. It is, in fact, a beverage.
I've never met someone who is middle of the road on cranberry sauce. People either love it or they hate it. And people are passionate. They either like the sauce or they like the jelly out of the can. I actually like both, so I'm breaking the mold. Mac, I digress. This is not a Thanksgiving podcast, but happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
On Thursday. So anyway, Black Friday, here's what Ethan writes. Another holiday season approaches and video games are once again awash in sales, discounts, and end-of-year inventory liquidations. Everywhere you click, there's another price with a red line through it and the promise of big savings. It's overwhelming and easy to tune out, so we've consolidated a much shorter list of the best Black Friday 2024 deals to highlight our favorite ones. Mac, I'm just going to scroll through some of these deals. The first one that they have here is a Marvel Unlimited subscription, which I guess allows you to collect digital comics on demand. And it's normally $70 a year, but the current sale runs through December 15th and gets you a sub for less than the price of a single comic per month. Any interest in that? Are you a comic book person? I honestly don't know this about you.
You know, I do enjoy the occasional comic book. I was really into the Marvel comics back when back when Marvel Civil War was on and Secret War, and had a collection of some of those. I very much enjoyed following through. I think in large part because it allowed me to engage in my base impulses. That is my hatred of Tony Stark. And Marvel Civil War just really gave me all the ammunition I needed to really, really despise him.
I love Tony Stark. Best Avenger. Best Avenger.
Hard disagree, but nonetheless, Mr. Nice Guy, I do enjoy it. I have been out of it for a while, although I do know they've done a lot of stuff. Now, this Marvel Unlimited subscription, am I to infer that for the price of less than a comic book, I can get access to all these digital comics?
Yeah, so it says you get accessibility of digital comics on demand, includes the majority of the back catalog of all the latest stuff on a 3-month delay. It's the perfect way to catch up on Jonathan Hickman's X-Men, Matt Fraction's Hawkeye, and Jason Aaron's Thor, as well as other great runs from the last decade.
Yeah, there's some good comics over the last decade.
There's a ton, and that's the first deal. I'm just going to scroll through some of these. Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition, which comes with the DLC for $40. That's a really good deal. 1 terabyte expansion card for your PS5 and Xbox, $100 from Western Digital. Star Wars Outlaws is $40 at many different places, just $30 off. And the no console required Xbox bundle, which gives you a controller and looks like a streaming stick to play Game Pass. And looks like it comes with a Game Pass subscription. Elden Ring for $20. Nintendo Switch Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Bundle for $225. Mac, so many good deals. Here's why I bring this up, and here's my question for you. I am not into Black Friday anymore. It doesn't excite me. Are you still a Black Friday person, or are you not into it anymore?
So it's been many years since I've lived in a population center. But back when I did live someplace close, I really enjoyed going on Black Friday to the physical places where there were deals going on, just because I really enjoyed the energy. You know, occasionally I'd pick something up, but like everybody sort of mad dashing around. There was an electricity in the air, and very rarely did people throw elbows. I was lucky to be in places where where it wasn't the video features the next day. But yeah, a couple of years I would do it with the whole family, and we'd have like walkies out and divide and conquer because they'd spread those deals out. Sometimes it's just fun to get tactical and sweep the other teams. So
well, when you come play laser tag, we'll get tactical, but I will not be getting tactical at Black Friday. When you said there was electricity in the air, I thought you meant like shanks and fists.
No.
But you actually just meant excitement.
Yeah, just the excitement.
Now, to be clear, when I say I'm not into Black Friday, not just the waking up, it's more I don't even really get excited for online deals as much. I do get excited, but I don't know. Like, there's just, you and I feel like, have access to so many video games.
We do.
And with that being one of my major hobbies, there's just not a lot of games that I want to play that I haven't already played due to lack of funds or access of some kind. That may sound arrogant. That's not the goal. But I mean, we review a lot of games on the podcast. I've had a PlayStation Plus subscription, an Xbox subscription for years. I take advantage of Steam sales throughout the year. And so there's just not a lot that really gets me hyped for Black Friday. Last thing I want to do is go stand in line. But even digitally, if I'm getting Black Friday stuff, a lot of it is maybe bigger box items that someone in my family wants for Christmas, rather than Elden Ring for $20. I don't know. I'm curious what the chat thinks. Like, I remember back in the day, Mac, 2010, I got that Xbox 360 and got Halo Reach. I can't even remember all the games that I got that first Black Friday, and I was so excited. Things have just changed for me. And I think that it's kind of changed for people of a certain age, where maybe we are just not as excited to, one, go out, or two, to really like wait online. And I'll say this, and then I'll let you say if there's anything else you want to say. Part of the fun of Black Friday back in the day was knowing that there were games that were a certain price, but also not knowing if you'd be able to find them, if they'd still be in stock. So when you went to the store and you found those $2 DVDs or Blu-rays or that Xbox game or that PlayStation game, you were so excited because you found what you were looking for, and now you can do it on Amazon.
Yeah. I will say I do remember very vividly one Black Friday going to the store, buying a large television for my parents, actually, and it being so large that I couldn't fit it inside of the vehicle. So I hooked a bit of, a bit of like 550 cord and tied the door kind of closed just a bit from the inside so that it wasn't like flapping in the wind, but yeah, I couldn't fit it in. And anyway, good times, definitely a good pick, but yeah.
If you are going out for Black Friday, let us know what you get, and please be safe. Mac, one more news story at least. We'll see how much time we have. This is on Engadget.com by Devendra Hardawar. Now, Mac, for context, the PlayStation Portal released a little while ago, and as you may remember, I do own one, and it is was strictly a streaming device, rather a remote play device, where you had to own a PlayStation 5, and you had to be connected to the internet, and you could play your PlayStation 5 remotely using the internet on this. Here's what has changed since we last recorded. This happened, I think, the day after our last podcast. At least give me true cloud gaming. That's what I asked for at the end of my PlayStation Portal review. A $200 device I ultimately found frustrating because it could only do one thing: stream games from your PlayStation 5. A year later, Sony has finally answered my prayers. The company has started testing cloud streaming on the Portal for PlayStation Plus Premium members, giving them instant access to more than 120 PS5 titles. And for once, I've started to hate this thing a bit less. After cloud streaming a bit of Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Control, and Demon's Souls, I have just one question for Sony. Why wasn't this on the PlayStation Portal when it launched a year ago? I was surprised to find that cloud streaming was far more reliable than the Portal's original PS5 remote play, which was and remains hit or miss. Sometimes it would work just great, giving me precious Spider-Man 2 on the couch, and sometimes it would refuse to connect to the PS5 for no apparent reason. And yes, I have pretty solid gigabit internet setup and Wi-Fi 6 router. Mac, bottom line, the PlayStation Portal is now more than just a remote play device. It can stream PlayStation games due to an update. As someone who does not own a PS5, now you don't have to use a PlayStation Portal. You just have to buy the Portal and also have a PlayStation Premium subscription to access those games. Does this make you any more interested in purchasing this to play some of the PS5 exclusives that you haven't had access to?
Well, I think that nails it right there, Mr. Nice Guy. You know me very well. Yeah, the only thing that I would have interest in would be the PlayStation 5 exclusives, because everything else I can get elsewhere if I'm so inclined. And there are some really good PlayStation games. There's no doubt about it. How much is what's the price of the PlayStation Portal these days?
The Portal is $200, but once again, you would have to buy the PlayStation Premium service, which I believe is $130 a year, and you are streaming the games, which means you do not own them. Before anyone goes after us in the chat, Mac and I are both aware that there are many PlayStation quote-unquote exclusive games available on Steam. Some of the Spider-Man, some of the God of Wars, Horizon Forbidden West, or Horizon Zero Dawn, and some others. But there are some that aren't available. So he would have access to those were he to purchase them.
Indeed.
Any interest in it at all, or not really?
Not really. I feel like I get most of my fix from the, from the Steam Deck for my needs portably. And while there are many fantastic works of art that are available PlayStation 5 exclusively, I'm cautiously optimistic that I'll be able to get them eventually in due time. And maybe by the time they're available to me, I will have a computer setup that is fast enough to handle them.
Yeah, fair enough. Your Steam Deck could handle some of them.
Indeed.
But who knows? Well, here's what I'll say. I thought the timing of this was interesting. We're going to talk more about some handheld stuff in a minute in topic of the week later on. But this was interesting because we know the Switch 2 is coming. We know that Xbox announced, and we were going to talk about this last week, but we didn't. We know that Xbox has announced that they are working on a handheld. So this addition was interesting, combined with the news that we'll talk about in a minute. To me, the PlayStation Portal has effectively been a paperweight for the past year, especially when I consider that I do have what's called Chiaki on my Steam Deck that allows me to play remotely.
Oh, yeah, I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah, it doesn't have the haptic feedback. It doesn't have some of the features, but it works very, very well and with much less lag than
Mr. Nice Guy. Lag's not really an important component of modern video game enjoyment, is it?
It's pretty significant when you're playing remotely, even if you're not playing multiplayer.
Yeah.
Just the single player inputs get pretty tough. But I don't know. If I could go back in time, I would not buy the PlayStation Portal. I would put that $200 towards something else. It's simply a waste of money. And I'll say this. Sony is super smart. They didn't put this on day one on purpose, but they knew they'd have the capability to do so later on. And this does nothing but increase the amount of people who will use PlayStation Premium, which is a super smart business move. So kudos to them for that. I would like to see some additional functionality added to the Portal. And I just don't think that this is worth it for everybody. But if you're a hardcore PlayStation person, the Venn diagram of people who have a PlayStation Premium subscription and own a Portal is probably, there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
So for those people, congratulations. You now get to play that stuff remotely. Mac, that has been our topic, our news of the week.
All right, well, now that we've taken a look at what's going on right now, let's take a little look into the past with some video game history. Mr. Nice Guy, I have some lovely, amazing, splendiferous things that have happened in the middle of November in years before. Some of them absolutely incredible, some of them just very, very cool. I will say that that the launch of the Game Boy Color is certainly a big one that weighs heavy for me. Middle of November 1998. It would, of course, later die in middle of November, November 15th, 2002, rather, with the last and final release for the Game Boy Color, at least in the US, of the Chamber of Secrets. Now, Nice Guy, I was on the old gray brick Game Boy for quite a while. 4 AA batteries.
Classic.
8 through
Classic.
that. I don't remember who it was who got it for me, but I believe it was a Christmas gift or something. The AC adapter for the gray brick Game Boy, so that I wasn't burning through all the batteries in the house all the time. But it was probably a gift more from my parents to themselves than to me, but nonetheless, the things you do for your kids. But when the Game Boy Color came out, Mr. Nice Guy, I believe you had one, right?
The Game Boy Color?
Yeah.
No, when it came out, I didn't have one.
Oh.
So I had the gray brick.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
At some point, I acquired a Game Boy Color, but for the most part, I was rocking the gray brick until I think the Game Boy Advance came out. We just loved that gray brick, man.
That's identical. I didn't have a Game Boy Color until the Game Boy Advance came out. So you and I both missed out on one of the most interesting things about the Game Boy Color entirely, and that was that there were these options on the Game Boy Color to select a color palette for games that didn't actually have,
correct,
a color. So you could go ahead and on the 94 original Game Boy games, they sort of called to a specific location in memory on boot up and preloaded the palettes that they thought would be most pleasing on the Game Boy Color. And then for later on titles, the palettes were already they had started adding those things. But you could pick different colors just by a button combo, and it was actually really cool. So anyway, Game Boy Color, cool, excellent. Mr. Nice Guy, something that released for the Game Boy Advanced. I know this is one of your favorites, Metroid Fusion.
Yeah.
Tell me, Mr. Nice Guy, any special memories or special love for Metroid
man,
Fusion?
It was, I don't even know why I bought Metroid Fusion. This was the point at which I was buying games with my own money. And for whatever reason, that was one of the games that I bought, and good job, because it was one of the best games ever for the Game Boy Advance.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know, Game Boy Advance, effectively a handheld that gave you Super Nintendo level 16-bit experiences. And Metroid Fusion was the first Metroid that I ever played all the way through. And I still own the physical copy, and I still pop it into my analog pocket every once in a while. And it was a journey, Mac. I would say one of the more instrumental games in making me the gamer that I am today less, dare I say, the man I am.
Yes, I dare you to say it.
Metroid Fusion, 10 out of 10.
A fantastic game. As a matter of fact, as a hint, if there are any of those eagle-eared amongst you, there is at least one sound test that is still unclaimed that features a sound from Metroid Fusion. Just as a little hint, I love Metroid Fusion as well. I didn't play it until much later, but I was so grateful for you gushing about Metroid Fusion, convincing me to play it myself. Well worth the time. Even years and years on, well worth it to play. Some other things that came out middle of November. There's so much because, of course, we're gearing up for the Christmas season. We have games like Half-Life and Half-Life 2, but slightly less, shall we say, earth-shattering, groundbreaking, but much like Metroid Fusion for you, very much informed much of the gamer who I am today. In 2008 and 2009, we had Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2. And those of you who've been here for a while have probably heard me talk about Zombie Home Evening, and I will say it again just briefly here, but we used to get together. We first got together with one single Xbox 360 and a copy of Left 4 Dead in the basement. We turned it on, we played it split screen. Somebody had a somewhat crappy video projector that we projected a nice large screen with in the basement. And then, of course, because we didn't have the best resolution in the world, we needed to get more 360s in there and more copies of Left 4 Dead so that we could play cooperatively. I, at the time, was undergrad, so I was working at a hotel at night, and they had just sort of refreshed their televisions for flat screen things. So we had these big old CRT televisions that they were getting rid of, but that still had perfectly reasonable pictures. So I took several of those home, we stacked them up. We didn't quite have a video wall, but we had several of these and the 360s to boot, and it was just a standing Monday evening sort of situation where we would get together, play the game, had a great time, always a good time. And Mr. Nice Guy, I believe you joined us for a couple of those, and it was just a great time, and it was awesome. Very much highlights the kind of camaraderie that I feel like all video games should sort of evoke, that frantic fun.
Yeah, I don't want to summarize it. I can't summarize it any better than you did, but yeah, that was one of the first times we hung out, and if I remember, it was at your friend's restaurant.
Yes, he was managing a restaurant, and so there were 4 television screens in there, kind of integrated. And so we after close, we came in, we brought the systems, and we played on there. It was much better than playing down there in the basement because of better televisions and better acoustics, surprisingly, but also good times. So yeah. A good couple of weeks for video games that left their mark indelibly on Mr. Nice Guy and I.
Yep.
So if you haven't tried any of those, trust us. They're good stuff. Get out there, play them. You won't be disappointed. And that's what I had for video game history this week.
Love it. I kid you not. Makes me want to go play Left 4 Dead, which it's one of those games, the community is still vibrant. And often it goes on sale, for those who don't know, for $1, $2. If you like this kind of game even remotely, there's literally no excuse for not owning it and just playing for a few hours and then having access to it to goof around whatever. So, great game, classic. Well, Mac, now it is time for our topic of the week, a segment where we talk about something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it. And Mac, I feel like I pulled up the wrong thing because I'm trying to find the article that I wanted to discuss. Okay, I do have the right one pulled up. So this is on techradar.com. So we just got done talking about how the PlayStation Portal got an upgrade that now allows it to cloud stream. And candidly, Sony recently announced that they're actually working on, or there's a rumor that they're working on a PlayStation 5 handheld, effectively. A handheld that will run PlayStation 5 games. And that it may or may not come out, but it's working, in the works. So this is techradar.com by Harnish Hector. Here's what Harnish writes.
Sony's PS5 Pro has been out less than a month, but there's already speculation about what its next gaming hardware release could have in store for us. And the latest report isn't even about some more high-performance PS6. Rather, it's that Sony is working on a new handheld that'll be able to play PS5 games natively. Little else is known about the project right now, but Bloomberg reports that sources familiar with the device say it'll compete against the Nintendo Switch and the final version of the Xbox handheld that's currently being prototyped. Sony currently has a pseudo PS5 Portable in the shape of the 5-star PlayStation Portal. However, where that handheld relies on an internet connection to facilitate remote play, or now cloud gaming for PS Plus premium members, this new handheld would run PS5 games all on its own, like a souped-up version of the scrapped PlayStation Vita or PlayStation Portable PSP. Don't get too excited about this possible return of the PSP just yet, though, as Bloomberg sources added that Sony could still decide against bringing this in-development handheld to the market, and that it's likely years away from launch. Mac, I guess my first question is, have you ever experienced one of Sony's handhelds? And number two, do you think that, I don't want to say do you think this is a good idea, but do you feel like this leads to oversaturation of the market, or is there a place for this, given what the Steam Deck can do, given what all other PC handhelds can do, given that there's a Switch, given that there's an Xbox handheld coming? Like, what do you think about Sony getting back into this market?
I don't believe I have ever experienced firsthand any of Sony's handhelds. I have heard great things about some of them. For example, I know that some of the PSPs wound up being fantastic emulation stations for PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games and such, and were easily hackable enough that they are very beloved by the community, at least the early renditions of them, if not so much the later ones. And also, I do know... no time for that. But...
No, say it. What were you going to say?
I also know that they had those UMD discs, which were...
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, which were like movies. I never experienced those. Were they good quality?
I mean, for the time, when I bought my PSP, it came with a copy of Hitch. Shout out to Will Smith and Miss Mendez, who were in that. I forget her first name. Eva Mendes, yeah, in that movie. Funny movie, good movie. Quality was fine, but once again, you could only watch it on the PSP.
Yeah, there were some interesting design choices, but overall, it seems like the PSP is relatively well regarded, if somewhat short-lived. So, no first-hand experience, just what I've heard about it. But as to the concern about a market being oversaturated, way back in the day, before we even started this show in its current iteration, but, back when we were doing Man Cave TV, the predecessor to this podcast, back then, I was doing a lot of stuff, tech stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
And most of that revolved around Android devices. And I remember that there was a lot of talk, especially in the early days of Android relevancy. It's just like, we can't, Android isn't going to be relevant. The market is already well dominated by Apple. All it will do will just saturate and things will never oversaturate it, and things will never get anywhere. None of these companies will be able to make a go of it selling these Android devices. Apple's already nailed it. And some many years later, we still have lots and lots of Android devices and plenty of companies that are making a good showing on their own with their Android devices. So, I mean, I don't know if I would say that the oversaturatedness would necessarily keep or should necessarily keep Sony from trying to get into the handhelds, especially if they can produce a better experience. The Steam Deck is great, but there are still areas to improve. And yeah, I'd like to see, if nothing else, the Sony getting involved, Microsoft getting involved in a way to push bigger and better things from the other people in the market there.
I like that idea of competition being elevated by other competition, right? It's very similar to my laser tag league. When I go to a laser tag session at this place I go to, Battle House,
on a Friday night with my wife or with my neighbor up the street. And it's just a bunch of casuals. You know, I go in and I'm flanking people and I'm killing them. And, but when I play today.
You destroy that kid at his 5th birthday party. That was his fault. He chose to walk in there and he chose to cry as a result.
I don't play, Mac. I don't play. No sympathy. No mercy. No, but even if it's like a 9 o'clock session where you got to be an adult to play, it's people who are casual and I'm dominating them. But when I went tonight, it's a lot of people who play this a lot. And so I was very average, if not below average tonight. Last week I killed people a lot, but this week I was very average. And it's the same thing with this. If a lot of people are putting out this type of hardware, it's going to elevate the game of everyone because they're going to look and see what that person is doing and say, oh, I got to really bring my A game today. Mac, here's what I'll say about this potential handheld and why I don't know if I'm excited about it.
Okay.
Back when the Nintendo DS and the PSP and even the 3DS were running the market, and the Vita, when they had an audience, it was because there weren't hybrid consoles like there are today. Now, your Steam Deck is a handheld console, but guess what? You can hook it up to your TV. And your Nintendo Switch is just a straight-up hybrid console, where you can have an awesome experience on that OLED screen if you have the Switch OLED, but you can also hook it up to your TV, and you can do some 4-player Super Smash Bros. Or Mario Kart with your friends. We no longer live in a time where people want separate handheld experiences that are watered-down versions of what you can do on a home console. The home console now is the handheld. And so for Sony to put out something that's derivative of what we already have and say, hey, now we have a handheld that can play the same games that are on your PS5. I don't know that I want that. I want something that's handheld that can play different games that I can't get anywhere else, but that's not the market and that's not the time that we're in anymore. And so I just don't know why they're releasing this. Those are my thoughts. You could agree or disagree, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, no. And again, like the article said, it's maybe possible that this doesn't even come to market, that it's just an in-development thing right now, seeing what they can push. But I, at the very least, like the idea of even Valve having to stretch themselves a little bit. So, yeah, who knows? Maybe it's just vaporware at this point, but I'd be interested in seeing what they had on offer.
I'm interested to see what they're doing, and I want to see what Xbox is doing. And I hope and I pray that Xbox doesn't just put out a streaming Xbox handheld. Because guess what? My Steam Deck can do that. And so can so many other devices.
Yeah.
Mac, that has been our topic of the week.
All right, well, now we turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off the ground. We call this Kick or Kickstart because at the end, after we discuss some of the virtues and the vices and take a look at this project, we're going to say whether or not we think it should be kicked out of here or whether it should be kick-started. And we encourage all of you to participate. Just shout it out on your bus ride. We're tabulating the results from here. So this is a game called Nullstar Solus, and that's S-O-L-U-S, kind of like a star. In this game, right, it revolves around a sort of sci-fi pixel art setting where the main mechanic of the game is flying around in an area with hazards, often tight areas, collecting all the MacGuffins, I don't know, energy balls, whatever they happen to be. In each of the levels, you take a side view while moving this scavenger drone around with cardinal direction-based thrusters. So, you press down and right, and you'll go diagonally up and to the left, as if you were propelling yourself in a zero-gravity environment. The physics isn't too different from something like Lunar Lander back in the 70s, that was an arcade game, or Jet Scout, a much more recent game that sort of has similar vibes to it. Now, this game in particular, it's the first Kickstarter of a crew called Smash Attack Studios out of Australia. Although it is not their first game, if you go to their Steam page, you can actually find that they've done one in the past. Maybe some more on that later. But it is their first Kickstarter, and they're looking for just shy of $8,000 to make this game. They're currently at about 15% of the way there, with 25 days left to go. And if you're interested in something like this, $12 is the minimum buy-in for a copy of it.
Yep.
So I did mention that they have another game on their Steam page. This looks like a very marked improvement. The first one looks definitely like a small studio's first attempt at something. And this studio happens to have about 5 or 6 people. Now, well, I'm sure we're going to talk about... I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about how much it actually costs to make a game. But Mr. Nice Guy, that's what I have at least on the overall of it. You're a little robot going around grabbing the MacGuffins, and in a dystopia world, it definitely does look like the kind of thing that will take a bit of effort to navigate. So if you're the type of person that gets frustrated easily, I suspect these might be a little bit on the difficult side.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this one.
Okay.
There's nothing about this that excites me. There's nothing about it that innovates. But Mac, recently I told you how I went to that arcade this past.
Yes.
And one of the games that we played while we were there was this game called Switch and Shoot. And it's a 1-button arcade game that's also on Steam.
Okay.
And when you push the button, your ship goes one way. When you push it again, it goes the other way, and it shoots as you're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's stuff coming down at you. And it's so simplistic, but so awesome that it went from being on Steam and Nintendo Switch to getting full arcade cabinet releases at a few different places across the country. So simplicity is never something that I will criticize. I guess I just don't understand the value proposition of this game that we're looking at on Kickstarter. Why should I buy this, and what makes it exciting?
Well, speaking for myself, Mr. Nice Guy, there is something about the thruster movement mechanic in a game that I just love. A lot like grappling hooks. I don't know what it is, but it always speaks to me. In the Outer Wilds, there is a lander module that you go ahead and you pilot around, and it has very much a sort of thruster mechanic to move around in that game. I'm just a sucker for this type of thing, and there are there are a few available games that have control schemes and styles like this, but it just speaks to me in a way that I don't know. I can't explain it, but I love the idea of the equal and opposite reaction. It appeals to me, and yeah, I get that it probably isn't for everybody, but I like the looks of it. At least, what the promise is of this.
Yeah, it's interesting because we were talking about Metroid Fusion earlier, and it almost gives me some Metroid Fusion type of vibes in terms of the art style, and maybe even in terms of the movement. So, I don't know.
There are some things that we always have to talk about with a Kickstarter project. And I'm a big stickler for, is there a playable demo? Can we see examples of how far along you are? And for a game that is going to release December of 2025, they must be a ways out from being complete, because there is no playable demo, there is no real concept work aside from the art that we see, as well as the rendered stuff that's part of the video, or the various GIFs demonstrating on the page itself. And for me, that's a big red flag. That's a big, I've got to stay away, especially in a situation where we've got a company that's asking for not nearly what it takes to produce something like this, for a price that seems, a little high. We don't know how much of the game there is, how many levels. Is $12 a good price for it? There's so many things. And for something like Mr. Nice Guy's comments there about, I don't see what it is that makes this thing worthwhile. If we had a playable demo, if we had a chunk of something, Mr. Nice Guy could try it out, and we could see what's going on. But But yeah, without those sorts of things, it's always a reluctant but a firm kick from me, in spite of how I might feel about the rest of it.
Yeah, man, it's tough because so sometimes I'm critical of people for not asking for enough money. I almost have to praise them for asking for as how much they believe they can get this done with. You know, less than $8,000 and the release date of what, 2025?
Yep, December.
We could call that naive, but we could also call it frugality. So that may be the case here, and so I applaud them for that, but the value proposition just isn't there for me. So I can't, in good conscience, kickstart this. It's a kick from me.
Indeed. We obviously wish everybody the best. We hope that this game gets funded. We hope that it is wildly successful, and we hope that it proves itself to be amazing. But the next time, we do sincerely hope that there is something for us to try as a part of the Kickstarter. And in the off chance that this is not successful with this Kickstarter, we hope that there is another option, perhaps even a relaunch. If so, we'll talk about it. But we hope that we get something to try out and see whether or not it's for us. But that has been Kick or Kickstart.
Yes, it has. And now it's time for a segment we like to call Nerd Flex.
Woohoo!
You see how I dragged that out so you could swallow your water?
I do. I appreciate that.
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the hosts. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And Mac, we're going to go straight to the test bank today.
Okay.
We're not playing around. It's Thanksgiving week. We're going to go for some randomized test bank questions. And if you recall that any of these have been done before in our random assortment, let me know. But here's the first question. It's a special round.
Woo!
Name, and it's interesting because we were talking about some of these earlier today. Name 3 4-player co-op games. This is easy. Do I need to set a timer?
The special rounds are as many as we can, 3 at the minimum. Left 4 Dead, Left 4 Dead 2, Gauntlet Legends, X-Men, NBA Jam.
Nah, that was 2-player. Actually, wait, you could play with 4. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, those are 5 off the top of my head. Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time, fantastic game. You owe it to yourself to play.
Simpsons Arcade, Ninja Turtles Arcade. I mean, I guess you could count like Mario Kart. That's technically more than 4. New Super Mario Brothers, though, you could count that.
I mean, what are we at? 8, 9 now? I think we blew this one out of the water.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if you could do 4-player Overcooked. Oh, Back 4 Blood. That was the one.
Oh. Yeah.
By the way, have you played Back 4 Blood, Mac?
I played it when it was in beta.
I remember that. Yeah.
The problem was my internet was just so bad, and playing online with other people was so crucial to the proper operation of the game that I just couldn't really make it work, which was unfortunate.
Well, hey, I mean, obviously all those ones we named were correct, but it gives a few answers on the back. It says BG3, which I assume is Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, yeah, Baldur's Gate 3, yeah.
And then Castle Crashers.
Oh, dang, yeah.
X-Men Arcade, which we got, and then Broforce, isn't it?
Oh, Broforce. Heck yeah, I've got that one on Steam. It's pretty fun.
Well, cool. All right. Oh, I think we've done this one before. Konami, what game features in Seinfeld in which George lugs an arcade machine across a busy street?
Oh, well, that's Frogger, but I don't think we've done it. Although I did talk about for Video Game History a few episodes back about how his fictional score had at the time, like, not only did he claim to, like, canonically in universe, he graduated from high school 10 years before Frogger came out, but then claims to be setting those scores at the arcade in high school. But then also, it wasn't until like 2016 or something that anybody successfully got the high score of George Costanza on that machine. So yeah, it was there, but that's how history will do for you.
Love it. Well, obviously it was Frogger. That one was super easy. I forgot to mention, if you're here live, you have a job to do. Get multiple choice gaming related questions in the chat, and Mac and I will use nothing but our noggins to try to answer. I went straight to the test bank because I'm exhausted. Okay, so Mario question. Interesting. And this will be our last question for the episode. We'll get viewer questions next time. Donkey Kong was originally designed with which cartoon sailor in mind? I feel like this is an easy question simply because cartoon sailor, I immediately think of Popeye. But I don't know who else it could be.
Yeah, no idea.
But I don't know that there's any connection between Donkey Kong and Popeye.
Yeah, was Donkey Kong in early versions wearing a sailor suit? Well, it's not multiple choice, so why don't you go Popeye and I go Donald Duck?
Fair enough. Popeye and Donald Duck. Yeah, it was Popeye.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to look up the history because that's super interesting. So I'll have to do that later. But we're gonna keep things moving for now. That's been our Nerdflex.
All right, and remember to tune in for our podcast if you want to try and stump us with your video game related trivia. Well, now we turn ourselves to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
I am not a lawyer. I just play one here on a podcast. And I have a little bit of an update on Billy Mitchell. So it's been a little while, but Billy Mitchell stylizes himself as the video game player of the century, was in some hot water and some legal troubles. We talked about that. We've going back to episode 150, I think, was the first time that we talked about any of that. But we've got an update on specifically the Billy Mitchell tape. Now, we chatted about this specific thing back in episode 264, because the background here was that there was some evidence that was, shall we say, damaging to Billy Mitchell and his claims that he was, in fact, innocent of the charges of cheating on his Donkey Kong scores. The damning evidence in question was it was a recording of him in 2018 describing exactly how he was going to fabricate evidence in order to prove that he didn't fabricate evidence. I know that it's a little silly to lie a bunch to prove that you're not a liar, but it made sense to him at the time. And if you go back and listen to the legalese for episodes 264 and 265, you can get, we go a bit more in depth on the exact scheme as it was alleged. But, so there's this phone recording, right? And this, of course, would be somewhat relevant to, say, at the time, an ongoing lawsuit between Billy Mitchell and Twin Galaxies about the claims that he had fabricated his scores. So the dude on the other end of the phone call, his name's David Race, and he recorded this phone call. Now, David lives in Ohio, and Ohio is a single-party consent state where you make a recording of a conversation, as long as one of you is cool with that, the recording can be made and is admissible in a court of law. But Florida is one of only 10, 11 states, 20% of the United States where both parties must consent. And so that makes, as silly as it sounds, because you might think that wiretapping is something that is exclusively the area of big government agencies. That's what the claim is. What this sort of illegality is essentially a wiretap. And so the claim from Billy Mitchell was that David Race's recording of this damaging evidence was essentially an illegal wiretap. And by claiming that it was illegal and tying that up in court, it prevented its use in the main show over in California because they don't want to let you use illegally obtained evidence in a court proceeding. It's a bad look, and it's a bad thing to do. So Billy succeeded in keeping this evidence from being submitted by first, challenging it in Florida court, And then after that was concluded, taking it to the appeals court. And then after that was concluded and the appeals court said, no, this is not run afoul, this evidence is fine, then taking it all the way to the Florida Supreme Court, where it sits for a little while before they eventually, just a couple weeks ago, dismissed the case and let the appeals court decision stand. That David Race was not required to abide by Florida law when he doesn't live there, wasn't there at the time, doesn't do any business or anything of the sort, in so on and so forth. So the Billy Mitchell tape of him talking in 2018 about how he was going to fabricate evidence to prove that he did not fabricate evidence of his scores, you can listen to, as it is a perfectly legal recording. But unfortunately, because it only just barely cleared, and Billy Mitchell settled his case with Twin Galaxies last year, or was it earlier this year? I believe it was last year.
I think it was last year.
Yeah, because of that, this evidence never got to be a part of it, and now is a bit of a moot point. But nonetheless, we finally have the answer that it was in fact not an illegal wiretap. It took a few years to get there, but we got there. Justice moves very slow sometimes. But that's just a little legalese update for you on the now moot point. So that's legalese.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, thank you for tuning in, everybody. Hopefully everyone has a fantastic Thanksgiving. Good food, good family, good friends, some relaxation. And yeah, before we go, we have one last segment called what we've been watching and what we've been playing. What we've been watching and what we've been playing, where we talk about just that, the cool nerdy stuff we've been into across all platforms. Mac, what you been watching and playing this week?
Well, as for playing, I've been playing a game I've been meaning to do for a while called Proto Droid Delta. Mr. Nice Guy, I know you're a big fan of the Mega Man X series. Did you ever play, like, the later ones?
I did not play X7 or 8, but I think I had, like, a couple of them, maybe X6 on, I think it was original PlayStation, actually. But not X7 or 8.
So in the later ones, I believe they experimented with doing a sort of 3D type of thing for the later Mega Man X games. I would say that Proto Droid Delta, while not a perfect game, very much has the vibe of a Mega Man X style game, but one of those later ones, 3D. So, if you took Mega Man X and Mega Man Legends and kind of mashed them together a bit, you would get something similar to this. And it's a good game. It was good. It was a little too short for my taste, but still I don't regret the purchase at all.
Sure.
Was able to beat it beginning to end, and still a couple collectibles to pick up. But yeah, a good time for sure. That's mostly what I've been playing. Also a bit of Creeper World 4, a good comfort game for me. Watching, though, one more playing. Obviously, I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons, as I've been teaching a course for the youths of the region at the library on the weekends, so that's a fun time. Recently watched The Wrath of Khan. Fantastic. Star Trek, the second Star Trek movie. Ricardo Montalban, boy, every second he's on screen is just a delight. So yeah, that's for me. What about you, Mr. Nice Guy? What have you been watching and playing?
No, I gotta give a shout out to this movie I watched. Mac, I have a Plex server. I have access to a Plex server that a good friend of mine has given me access to. And this is a movie that's just on Netflix that we found via Plex. Mac, sometimes for date night, you just stay home, you watch a corny movie, and you have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
And this past week, my wife and I watched a movie called The Union with Mark Wahlberg and Halle Berry. It's kind of like a spy espionage movie, but almost like a comedy as well.
Really?
And so, it's not quite as it's less serious than like an Ocean's 11.
Okay.
And so I cannot in good conscience recommend this movie and be like, yeah, go spend, an hour 47 minutes of your life watching this. But for a date night at home, it was a good time.
So when did the Funky Bunch show up to support Marky Mark?
They did not make a cameo in the movie.
It's a
But,
missed
you know,
opportunity.
Your boy J.K. Simmons was in the movie. I believe you're a J.K. Simmons fan.
I love J.K. Simmons. Absolutely.
Yeah, phenomenal voice. Phenomenal actor. And wasn't he in Spider-Man as well?
Oh, yes. He needs pictures of Spider-Man.
He was the news guy. He does a great job.
J. Jonah Jameson, excuse
Jonah
you.
Jameson,
Mr. Nice
the
Guy.
The news guy. I know. Revoke my nerd card. But anyway, we watched that. We've been watching just some random shows. It's Christmas. We're kind of dabbling in the Christmas movies, but not too much yet. As far as playing, my son babysat for a friend this past weekend, and he played this game on Steam called Bobble Battle, excuse me. It's a $10 game on Steam. Very, very simple, but a lot of fun. So I've been playing some of that with the kids, and then doing a little bit of Black Ops 6 as well, trying to work my way through this battle. Mac, as usual, I'm out of it today. Forgot to ask the chat what they're watching and playing, but I bet they're playing and watching some awesome stuff. So I say you take us home, and then I get some sleep.
Can do. Well, thanks everybody for turning out to the show. A little bit later for the next couple of months, we're going to be starting probably at 7:30 Pacific, 9:30 Central, give or take, as we make room for The League. But we do look forward to this every Tuesday. We appreciate you coming out, helping to keep it nerdy, helping to make this nerdy. So do come out. Twitch.tv/2nerds in a pod. And to everybody who's listening after the fact, you're awesome. Be excellent to each other. And we'll see you later.
Deuces.
Bye.
Eat some turkey.